You didn't land here by mistake. I know that sounds strange. You were probably scrolling. Maybe you clicked this without thinking, maybe it was playing in the background while you were doing something else. But then something made you click this. There's a reason people feel pulled towards certain moments without understanding why. A reason something as simple as a video, a voice, or a sentence can feel like it was meant for you, and only you. The psychologist Carl Jung called this kind of thing synchronicity. Not just coincidence, but meaningful timing. Events that connect not through logic, but through significance. And more often than not, we brush these things off. We call them random, weird timing, just a fluke. But ask yourself this: how many times have you stumbled on something right when you needed to hear it? Not when you were ready in a textbook sense, not when everything was perfect, but when your edges were worn thin? You're not imagining that pull. Studies in cognitive psychology have shown that our brains are constantly filtering out information. We're exposed to nearly 11 million bits of data every second, but the conscious mind can only process around 50 out of 11 million. Let's be real for a moment. If you've made it this far, it's probably because something's been off lately. Not a full-blown crisis, just that quiet hum in the background you can't quite explain. A restlessness that doesn't go away, no matter how much sleep you get. You know what I'm talking about? That feeling like you're waiting for something but you don't know what. You go through your routine, you check the boxes, maybe even smile at the right times, but underneath it all, there's this weight. Like something's missing and you can't name it. You might not have told anyone about it because it sounds vague even to you. It's not something you can throw into a text or casually bring up in conversation. So instead, you keep moving. You stay busy. You try to stay functional. But here's the thing. Emotional disconnection doesn't always show up as sadness. Sometimes it shows up as boredom, numbness, overthinking, scrolling without feeling. And that's what this part is really about. Recognizing that unsettled feeling for what it is, a signal. Not a signal that something is wrong with you, but that something inside of you is stirring. According to a 2023 study published in Frontiers in Psychology, people often suppress transitional emotions, those feelings that emerge when we're between phases of identity or life direction, because they don't have a clear outlet. We're conditioned to either label feelings as positive or negative, but not everything fits neatly into those categories. Sometimes it's just a quiet discontent that builds. So I want to ask you directly, when was the last time you truly felt present? Not just existing in a space, but actually there, mentally and emotionally, not drifting or numbing or waiting for the next thing. If you're struggling to remember, that's okay. That question isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to open a door. Because naming the disconnection is the first step toward coming back from it. And maybe, just maybe, that's why this message is reaching you now. You didn't show up here because you were bored. You stayed because something in this rhythm, in this tone, in this moment, matched something in you. That low-level static you've been feeling. That's not background noise. That's your system trying to get your attention. You're not broken for feeling it. You're human. So don't dismiss it. Don't scroll past it like you've done before. Sit with it. Let it be there without needing to fix it or define it. There's value in that pause. And in that pause, something starts to move. Now let's talk about where that movement tends to come from and why timing, strangely enough, often does make all the difference. Let's get into something specific now. Why this is happening now. Not earlier, not later, but here, in this exact moment. You might think you've just happened across this because of a YouTube algorithm or a random scroll. And yes, there's truth in that. But the real question is, why did it land this time? Why didn't you scroll past like usual? Because there's a difference between seeing something and being ready to feel it. Human attention is shaped by emotional state. That's not some abstract theory. It's how your brain actually works. When you're overwhelmed, distracted, or guarded, your mind filters out anything that feels emotionally inconvenient, even good things. Researchers at Harvard and the University of Wisconsin found that when we're emotionally depleted, we're less likely to retain information or feel connected to it, which means if this message is hitting now, it's not because it's any more powerful than what you've seen before. It's because you've opened up enough to receive it. You've probably heard people say, "I wasn't ready for that before." That applies here too. Maybe a week ago, you would have skipped this. A month ago, it would have felt irrelevant. But something in your life cracked open just enough to let this in. Think about that for a second. How often do we assume we need a plan to change, some clean, mapped out strategy? But what actually changes us are these small, quiet openings. The moment you hesitate before reacting, the second you question a belief you've held for years, the pause that lets something new slip through. That's where timing comes in. Not as fate, but as readiness. And readiness doesn't announce itself. There's no signal telling you you've leveled up, and now you get clarity. It usually sneaks in while you're tired, when you've had enough noise, when the old ways aren't working anymore and you're too drained to pretend. It often looks like burnout, or boredom, or a day where nothing makes sense. That's when the window opens, and that might be why you're here. So don't ignore the timing of this moment. You're not imagining the resonance. It's real. And now that it's landed, the question becomes, what do you do with it? You might expect clarity to arrive as some sudden realization, some massive breakthrough that flips everything into place. But most of the time, it's not like that. Real shifts happen slowly, silently. It's that first time you say no to something that drains you, and you don't explain yourself. It's when you wake up and notice you're no longer craving the things that used to validate you. It's when you don't laugh at a joke that feels off, and you realize you're not performing anymore. These aren't dramatic scenes, but they are proof that something inside of you is already moving. The psychologist James Clear, best known for his work on behavioral identity, talks about how change isn't about big goals. It's about casting small votes for the type of person you want to become. Each quiet moment where you act differently, think differently, pause instead of react, that's a vote. And it adds up, not in a way that's always visible right away, but in a way that builds something permanent underneath the surface. So ask yourself, what have you stopped pretending to care about lately? What kind of silence has felt heavier than noise? What small thing have you done recently that surprised you? Something that felt like a flicker of your real self showing up. Those moments matter, not because they're grand, but because they're honest. And here's the point you need to hear right now. Change doesn't always feel like change. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, like saying, I can't keep doing it this way. And that's enough. That's where it starts. So if something in you has shifted, even slightly, trust it. You don't need to rush it or define it. Just don't ignore it. Because once you notice the shift, you can't unsee it. By now, you might be sensing it. That quiet shift you can't unfeel. The pull towards something more honest. And what usually follows is the part people struggle with the most, letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be. That's the point we're sitting in now. Not because you failed, not because something went wrong, but because somewhere along the way, the script you were following stopped fitting. And maybe it never really did. Most of us live by scripts we didn't write, expectations passed down, roles we were given, versions of ourselves we shaped to survive. to belong, to not make things harder. You might have built a whole life out of being dependable, or quiet, or agreeable, or successful on paper even if it felt empty in your body. So when you start to outgrow that, it feels disorienting. Not just because things change, but because there's grief in leaving behind the version of you that got you here, even if that version was struggling. Have you felt that? That hesitation to change because part of you wonders, who am I if I'm not this? That's not a small question, and it doesn't have a fast answer. But here's something worth considering. Letting go doesn't mean erasing everything. It just means you stop holding on to what no longer feels real. If you found yourself editing parts of your personality depending on who's in the room, if you've been showing up in ways that keep the peace but cost you your peace, if you've been tired, not from effort, but from pretending, then this is your edge, the place where the script ends and your real questions begin. And no one can write this next part for you. But you also don't need to figure it out all at once. You only need to admit that you're ready for something different. The rest comes from paying attention, not to what people expect, but to what finally feels like it belongs to you. Now that the old script is loosening its grip, you might notice something unexpected. Not a new version of you, but a familiar one. This part of the journey isn't about reinvention. It's about remembering what was buried, parts of you that were quieted down, dismissed, or tucked away to keep the peace. Think back. Before you started measuring your worth by how productive you were, before you filtered yourself to avoid conflict, before you convinced yourself that certainty was safer than curiosity, what did you know about yourself that didn't need to be proven? That's what's resurfacing now. Not because you're becoming someone new, but because the noise is finally quiet enough for you to hear the parts you've ignored. This isn't just theoretical. In 2020, researchers at the University of Toronto studied the impact of self-suppression on long-term mental health. Their findings showed that people who consistently suppress authentic parts of themselves in favor of socially accepted behavior report significantly higher levels of anxiety and depressive symptoms over time, even when they appear to be doing fine externally. In other words, losing touch with who you are doesn't always look like a breakdown. It often looks like going along with things, being easy to be around, not rocking the boat. So if you're starting to feel a little more sensitive lately, a little less tolerant of what used to be tolerable, take that seriously. That discomfort you feel when something doesn't sit right anymore, that's your inner compass coming back online. You're not overreacting, you're realigning. Ask yourself, what have I known deep down, but kept pushing aside because I thought it would be inconvenient? Whose voice have I been prioritizing over my own? What kind of life would I actually choose if I wasn't trying to meet anyone else's expectations? These questions don't need immediate answers. They just need your honesty. That's where memory lives, not in your past, but in your capacity to tell the truth about what matters to you now. And maybe that's what this moment is really offering you. A chance to return to something you didn't lose, only forgot. If you've made it this far, pause for a second. Really, just notice that. You didn't click away. You didn't drown this out with the next thing. You stayed. And whether you realize it or not, that decision matters. Because staying present is one of the hardest things to do when your default mode has been to run, scroll, distract, or explain yourself away. The point we're landing on now is simple. This moment is yours. Not because it fixes everything, not because it hands you clarity on a silver plate, but because it gave you a mirror and you had the courage to look. You might not know exactly what's next. You might still feel unsure or even stuck. But something moved in you. That's the part you don't want to overlook. Growth rarely feels like progress when you're in it. It feels like doubt. It feels like discomfort. But moments like this, moments that stir something quiet and honest, are how it starts. This isn't the part where I tell you what to do. There's no script for where you go from here. But if something opened up in you today, don't rush to close it again. Sit with the questions that found you. Let the discomfort breathe. Let the clarity take its time. And if any part of this landed for you, if something felt true, even in a way you can't explain yet, mark it. Not for me. For yourself. Write a word, a sentence. Drop a comment that simply says, "I'm listening." That's not for validation. It's a signal to your future self that you were here, awake, at this exact point in your life. You didn't just stumble into this video. You showed up right when you were meant to. And now that you're here, really here, what are you going to do with it? Because this moment, it's yours. And that's where everything begins.